Hi Victoria community, and welcome to another episode of the VISD Highlight. I'm Ashley Scott, Executive Director of Communications for Victoria ISD, and on today's episode I have a special guest. I have Melissa Correll, Chief Innovation Officer for VISD, joining us today. Welcome, and I'm so glad you're here with us.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm so glad to be here.
So today on the VISD Highlight, we're going to be talking about finding their and. This is a phrase that you've heard us use a lot in VISD, and we want to share just a little bit more about what creates finding their and what it means. So I know that we use finding their and across all VISD platforms in sharing information and why we do what we do in VISD for our students. But I feel like we've generalized it to a senior walking across the stage and having a diploma and something to do on Monday morning, whether that be joining the military, acceptance into college, a job, certifications from CTE courses, but it's so much more than that. Can you share, where did finding their and come from?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I want to start by saying that the phrase finding their and didn't come from VISD. We didn't coin that phrase. But in fact, that phrase came from our strategic planning process. About a couple of years ago, we began interacting with the community, with our teachers, with our staff, with our students, and we wanted to know, what is it that the community feels they want for their kids? What are their hopes and dreams? We wanted to make sure that what we were providing in VISD is what the community wants us to provide for our students. So we began this process. And through that strategic planning process, the phrase finding their and came about. That phrase, as you alluded to, just has caught on. And so everywhere you go, it comes to signify that final product of a school, of a student from our schools, which is being ready to launch their next step and find their passion.
So, finding their and doesn't just start their senior year when they're applying to colleges or figuring out what they're going to do after they graduate. VISD has set up pathways and programs for students as early as elementary school, pre-K and kindergarten to start exploring what their and may be. Can you share more about the programs and pathways available?
Sure. So from the strategic planning process, again, another piece that came out is this idea that there are no lesser paths, there are only different paths. And what's important about that is understanding within that, what that means is we need to have different paths. We need to have different options, we need to have different choices, and understanding that students are individuals. They have passions and dreams, and they have modalities of learning in which they prefer that are different. In VISD, we wanted to make sure that those students, all of our students, had an option that was congruent with them, that felt good for them about how they'd like to learn, what dream they wanted to pursue, what their passion was. We also recognize that finding your and doesn't start in, finding your and doesn't start in 9th grade when you're like, oh my goodness, let me find my selections. But in fact, finding their and starts in the earliest grades. That you start your launch the very first time a student enters our public schools. And so as we think about building out our pathways and building out our choice options, we wanted to make sure that we had a pre-K through 12 experience for students. So we've built out a STEM pathway, pre-K through 12. We've built out a personalized learning pathway, pre-K through 12. We have a couple of choice programs with our pathways in technology, early college, high schools that really give students opportunities to earn some college credit, to get some industry experiences at no cost to the student or the parent. We also have a couple of other schools. We have an ACE school, and we have an early childhood pre-K center as well as part of our portfolio of those choice options for kids. The bottom line is in VISD, we want to make sure that we have a best fit school for every kid, because every kid deserves to go to a school that is aligned to them and helps them to meet their passion and follow their genius.
And so for any parents or guardians that want to learn more about choice pathways available for students and the campuses that they're offered at, you can visit the VISD website, www.visd.net, and visit the Office of Innovation. All the choice campus information is listed under their department web pages. Before this airs, y'all will have hosted a Portrait of a Graduate community event. And Portrait of a Graduate really folds into finding their and, because there are components within that build upon a student having a successful launch. So can you share about Portrait of a Graduate?
The Portrait of the Graduate work really is an extension of finding their and, because what it does is really begin to identify and delineate those attributes and those skills and those characteristics that are important for a student to be ready to walk across that stage the Monday morning after graduation and pursue their and, to be ready for work, for college, for life, whatever that next step is. And so through this process, we are really then developing out these key skills so that as an educational assistant, we can make sure that those are folded into every single thing that we do. So it's not just the academic curriculum, but it's also that student as learner and that student as person. How can we provide those experiences that will allow a student to develop these characteristics that are going to make them this person that's able to walk across that stage, pursue their and be successful at pursuing their and.
So I'm gonna add in a trick question here because we didn't practice this. Y'all have held events with elementary 5th graders and junior high student leaders that come and y'all share what Portrait of a Graduate is, and they provide input on what skills they think they need. So what are some skills that they've told you they feel a graduate needs?
Sure. So a lot of the things that we hear from students. Now, we have held these events for students, for teachers, for the community. We've had all kinds of information streams. So for students, one of the things that they really want to know and be able to do is be able to communicate with each other, be able to have some of those problem-solving skills, be able to make sure that they can express what it is that they want to do. They also express like an interest in knowing, if I know what I want to do, what's my next step? So, for example, a 5th grader expresses, what do I do in middle school? What's my next step, right? And then the 8th graders are like, well, what do I do in 9th grade? What are the electives that I take?
Right. Interesting. All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of information regarding finding our and thank you so much for being on this latest episode. I think it's so important for our community to know the work that's happening in VISD for students and with students so that they're successful once they walk across that stage. Thank you for joining us on our latest episode of the VISD Highlight. As always, we want you to tune in and we want to make sure you're following us for the latest news for VISD. So make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Victoria ISD, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, we'll see you later.